This
Force.
conference will now be recorded.
I'll be running the meeting here today. We also have Ben Wade on from CWCB and Megan as well. So, guys, how have we been doing this? Have we had everybody on the call introduce themselves? Or do we just say we can look at who's online by clicking on the little icon?
Yeah, we can kind of see who's online, and then if people don't have their names, like if they show up as a phone number, we've been asking folks just to introduce themselves in the chat.
If they have a phone number. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as far as I can tell, it looks like everybody who I see here has put their name down. I see caller 4 might want to introduce themselves in the chat. Elise T is Elise Tyne from the Division of Water Resources as well. I do want to make one announcement, and that is we are going to have just a slight change to the agenda. I think after we have the NRCS report, we'll just have a short 5-minute presentation from Linker Technologies. They're going to be talking about some federal funding that they just got for a Colorado drought project. So we'll be putting them in there before we touch impact task forces, water providers in discussion. We'll be hearing from Linker. Megan, do you have any announcements, or Ben?
I don't. This is Megan.
Okay, great.
Yeah, same, Tracy. I don't either.
Okay. And again, if you have joined us, I see caller number 4. If you could identify yourself in the chat window, that would be great. Otherwise, let's go ahead and jump into our report from the state climatologist. We have Becky Bollinger joining us today for the presentation.
Hello.
Hi, Becky.
I'm going to put it in slideshow. Let me know if it's on the wrong screen when I do that. Looks like it's okay, right?
Yeah, looks good, Becky. Thank you.
Great. All right. A lot to talk about. Lots of exciting climate things that have been happening since the last meeting. So I'll jump right in. It doesn't want to. There we go. Okay. So in our recap, we're going to be talking about 2020 water year to date. We're going to focus on our extreme August and then go into the extreme September that we've been having. I'm sure a lot of you have some interesting pictures like the ones that I took just one day apart. The picture on the left was Labor Day, and the smoke from the Cameron Peak fire was so thick that we needed headlights to drive, and the street lights came on. It was quite the sight. I've never seen anything like that, having lived in Colorado almost my whole life. And then the picture on the right was from the next day with snow that started to stick, and we got a pretty decent snow event. Quite exciting. This is a snapshot of August across the country. You can see that a lot of the western states experienced a very hot August, For us, it was our hottest August on record. These records go back to 1895, so that's 126 years of record, and it really knocked out of the park the previous record from 2011. Just not even close how hot this August was. You can see the table on the right, how the water year has stacked up in terms of ranking. Most of them have been warmer than average. Of note is that May was updated to be 4th warmest May on record, and October was the 3rd coolest on record. And then another thing to note is that the summer, which is the June, July, August period, was the 3rd warmest summer on record. This is how those temperatures looked across the state. If you take all those locations and average all their temperatures through August. So if it's in a yellow area, it was in the top 33rd percentile. So if you had 100 years in your record, only 33 would be warmer and the remaining 67 would have been colder. And the orange is the top 10th percentile, so top 10 ranked out of 100 years warmth. And then that maroon is record warm. So we can see that pretty much all of Western Colorado experienced a record warm August. Many individual stations reported their warmest August. And most of the state was warm with the exception of a couple of areas in the far eastern plains. It's been a bit of a switch since we went into September month to date, which is interesting because this doesn't really capture the heat that we have experienced in September. But September to date, here's how the temperatures have lined up. If you take all the temperatures for September and compare it to average, we've got a lot of cooler than average spots. And the gray is close to average. So we don't really have a lot of warmer than average spots when we include all of September, which really shows how cold that brief cold snap was. Switching over to precipitation across the country, you can see that pretty much everywhere west of the Mississippi high plains all the way west have been drier than average. Of note that all around us, Nebraska, Utah, and Arizona had their driest August on record. We had our 5th driest August on record. Also of note is that it's been the 7th driest summer. That June, July, August period was 7th driest. And really of note is that our 12-month period that runs from September through August is the 2nd driest that period has been in that 126-year record. So it has been dry for quite a long time. And you can see in the table that setup that not a lot of months really stand out. Aside from August and April, there's a lot of in the middle, but when you add them all together, cumulative, it really takes a toll, and that's how you end up with a 12-month period that's 2nd driest on record. Here's how that laid out for the state, across the state. So that red again is that record driest, which is a lot of Western Colorado. NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information do records for climate divisions too, which we don't look at too often, but it is interesting to note that the Colorado River Climate Division, which is pretty much all of Western Colorado, was the hottest August on record and the driest August on record. And you can see that there are only a couple of spots that really show up as being closer to average or slightly wetter than average. If you see there in southern Lincoln County or down in Los Animas, Bent and Baca counties. And they did get some relief. It didn't come from a lot of events, so it was good to see, but probably a little bit too little too late for what they needed down there. So this is looking at October through August, going from the beginning of the water year and through to the end of August, to see that long-term dryness that has set up. So again, that orange color is in the bottom 10th percentile. So in 100 years, 90 years would be wetter. And we have that bottom 10th percentile throughout a significant amount of the state. Not as much in the northern part of the state. So the dryness that has been occurring there has been a bit shorter term, but everywhere else, this has been going on for a while. So this is looking at September precipitation through the 21st on the left. On the right is what the average September precipitation usually looks like. You can see the map at the link below that, and then you could click on individual station dots there to see their specific monthly precipitation averages. So looking at the map on the left, the darker green color, we're looking at ranging between 1 inch and 2 inches of moisture since the beginning of the month. And if you compare that to the map on the right, the areas in purple typically see 3 inches or more. So those highest elevations in Western Colorado typically see over 3 inches in the month of September. So those areas that look wetter on the map on the left, it's good to see, but it hasn't really been anything spectacular, shall I say. And the lighter green that we see across a lot of eastern Colorado is 1/2 inch to 1 inch, which really lines up with what they would typically see in an average September, as you can see between that orange and yellow color in the map on the right, with the exception of Logan, Phillips, Washington, and Yuma that did get a little bit more than average. So overall, good to see the precipitation, not a drought buster. So let's say we follow the hottest August on record with a record early September snow. At the end of August, if you would have asked me, do you think it'll snow in September? I would have placed bets that it would not, that we would not see September snow. So it was quite the shock to me that we can still get that kind of event. If you go to the National Weather Service office page for Boulder, they have a page that's called September 2020 Early Snow. It's got a lot of cool stuff on there about the event. And this is a list of records set specifically for Denver that you can look at. That is, if you're a data geek and like records like I do, it's quite entertaining and exciting to look at. A couple of the things noted are that they set record highs early in the month and then quickly got their earliest freeze on record and tied record lows just a couple of days later. So I think there's one here about the shortest time between a record high and a record low. And also the shortest time between a 100-degree day and snowfall, where they say here the previous record was 38 days in 2019. The average number of days between 100 degrees and measurable snowfall is around 85 days typically between those two things. So that's quite an event that we saw. So here is the snowfall totals mapped across the states. The link at the bottom is where you can find these interactive maps if you're interested in finding snowfall total maps. They're quite interesting to look at and pretty accurate. So this was a very widespread event for the state. extending all the way onto the eastern plains with quite decent amounts. We're looking at 4 to 6 inches. Northern Colorado, particularly over the Cameron Peak fire, saw about 10 inches of snowfall. And down through the central mountains and the southern mountains, looking at 12 or more inches of snow, and even into the San Luis Valley getting over 10 inches of snow, ranging on the Front Range anywhere from probably anywhere from 3 to 6 inches mostly, but a quite impressive event. And here's what the CocoRa's reporters in our state reported for snowfall this month. So those light blue dots are anywhere from less than an inch to 3.7 inches. As you get into those darker blue, you're looking at that 3 to 6 inch range. And then these oranges and maroons are more than 10 inches of snow from this event, which is just amazing for a September event. And also, I don't know if we've announced really these new maps for CocoRa's. They're really great. Please visit maps.cocoras.org. One of the new great features on here is that you can set up custom dates to do accumulation. And as long as that station has 90% of its data, you'll see a dot there, which has been highly motivating for our CocoRa's volunteers to be more continuous with their reports. So check that out. Just a few more honorable mentions of what has happened in September. The La Junta Municipal Airport recorded the hottest September temperature for the entire state with 108 on September 6th. The earliest snow on record for Fort Collins happened on September 8th with 2.3 inches. Their previous earliest snow, and these records go back to 1893, their previous earliest snow was September 12th. So we beat that by 4 days. Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo, with September high temperatures, were able to break their records for the most 90-degree days in the year. In 2020. So Denver and Colorado Springs beat out 2012, and Pueblo beat out 2000 for those records. Back to that snow event, Monte Vista reported 14 inches of snow in 2 days, which really topples all their September records and even counts it as one of the top ranked snowiest events in all the months. It's quite impressive there. 2 stations in our state tied the national record for the shortest period between 100 degrees and snowfall. That was La Junta, which reported 101 on September 7th. If that sounds confusing, it's a reporting time when they do their reports. So it actually occurred on the 6th. But it comes on the daily report as the 7th, but they reported 101. And then 2 days later, the report has that 3.4 inches of snow. Ordway reported 104, and then 2 days later reported 3.9 inches of snow. Rapid City National Weather Service office also reported a 2-day period between 100 degrees and measurable snowfall. So quite an event that spanned more than just one state. And before that, the record shortest period for the nation between 100 degrees and snowfall was 5 days. So I did a quick look on NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information for records, and 28 stations in our state set records for the highest September temperature. And that includes SNOTEL stations and co-op stations as well. So 28 of them highest September temperature on record this month. We're shifting gears and talking about drought now. So released as of Thursday, this is the most current US Drought Monitor map. And you can see that we are part of an area that is in the worst drought in the country right now. And that spans through our state and the other Four Corners states and up into Wyoming and even out west into Nevada, California, and Oregon, and down into Texas. Focusing in on Colorado, you can see that over 50% of our state is in a D3 or D4 drought. As a reminder, D3 is a drought that's in the 2nd to 5th percentile ranking, so something that you would only see 1 every 20 to 1 every 50 years, I think. And then the D4, which we can still see in Kiowa County, there is an event that would be 1 out of 50 to 1 out of every 100 years on record. We do have some spots that are just in moderate drought or abnormally dry. We were able to make some minor improvements thanks to the snowfall, but those were pretty limited as it it was a very beneficial event, but not quite enough to erase those deficits that have been building for quite some time. These are the changes that we've seen in the U.S. Drought Monitor since the last time I presented for the Water Availability Task Force back in June. So comparing the June map to the latest map, and then looking at how the categories have changed. Anywhere where you see those yellows, oranges, and browns has been a deterioration, and then where you see the greens, there have been improvements. So we have seen some improvements in the San Luis Valley, Sangre de Cristos, and into the Arkansas Valley from more recent events, I would say, that occurred in August. And then we've seen a lot of deterioration in northern Colorado, particularly northwest Colorado, highlighting that has been a more short-term dryness thing that has become a problem. So we're going to look at the standardized precipitation index next, which is a good way to analyze drought through just looking at how anomalously dry or wet precipitation is for a location. So if you see a gray dot, that's in that near normal range. And then the dots that are yellow, orange, and red have been colored to match with the U.S. Drought Monitor categories. So the more red the color gets, the more extreme dry that standardized precipitation index is for that location. So we can see, looking at the past 30 days, we have not too bad conditions across the state, a couple of dry areas. Sorry about that. Couple of dry areas in southwest Colorado and in the northern mountains. But overall, we have had a shift to a bit of near normal to wetter SPIs. If we extend out over 90 days, you can really see that dryness pop. You can see why we deteriorated conditions in northern Colorado, and why there were some improvements made in southeast Colorado with these more near normal dots around here in the Ark Valley. But we still have a lot of dryness going on. So D1 equivalent, D2 equivalent across the Eastern Plains. And then as we move west of the Front Range and into the mountain areas, we start to see those D3, D4 equivalent SPIs throughout western Colorado. Extending out to the 6-month SPIs really shows that long-term dryness across most of the state. We have D3, D4 equivalent showing up in the Eastern Plains, across the Front Range, into the Rockies and West Slope, and onto the west side and in the southwest corner of the state, and throughout the higher elevations that surround the San Luis Valley. And a quick look at the 12-month SPI, which doesn't look quite as bad as the 6-month SPI, except then you realize that it's a whole year's worth of data driving this dryness. So it's definitely not a pretty picture, and still quite a few of those D3, D4 dots we're seeing throughout all corners of the state. Another index we've been looking at in the summer to assess the drought conditions are EDDI, and this is the Evaporative Demand Drought Index. If you were on in June when I presented, you know I was talking about a flash drought event that was occurring over the eastern plains of Colorado, where basically these D4 conditions showed up over here in eastern Colorado in late June and early July. So what this is taking into consideration is your temperature, relative humidity, solar radiation, and wind. So this is not precipitation driven, but atmosphere driven. How much moisture does the atmosphere want to take from the ground? And when you get these yellows, orange, and red colors, it wants to take a lot more of that moisture from the ground, which just exacerbates any precipitation deficits that you have and makes it worse. So this is looking over an entire 3-month period, which is a pretty long period when we're talking about EDDI. And to see those dry conditions throughout, especially over the western side of the state, this is pretty extreme, primarily driven by those very hot temperatures, but also taking into account drier relative humidities. We didn't get that monsoon moisture, which means, you know, we didn't get those higher dew points that we typically want to see, and winds that continued through a lot of those higher elevations have led to this. And the changes over the last 30 days show that that high evaporative demand over the eastern plains, the change in the category did settle down a bit. So there was, they still have evaporative demand going on there, but it lessened from what it was 30 days ago. And then we've seen an increase in the western part of the state. Another index that we like to look at for drought monitoring is soil moisture. Peter's been making these great soil moisture maps for us to assess. And he's also colored the soil moisture based on the drought monitor categories. So this is as of September 16th. And you can see where there's gray means it's not in one of those drought categories. And then as you see the yellow, we start to get into the dry categories and then drought categories. This is in the top 10 centimeters of the soils. And then if we look through a larger column at the top meter of soils, we can see a little bit of that longer term drought. So the one on the left, you're looking at surface, which is going to be more responsive to short-term events. And then the deeper you go, you're going to be a little bit slower to respond to events and show that more long-term pattern. So we can still see a lot of the drought conditions prevailing throughout the eastern plains and into the higher elevations in West Slope for Colorado.
Hey, Becky, this is Megan Holcomb. I just had a question about these maps, which are super helpful. Can you speak briefly to the scale of this grid and the data source that you all are using?
Yep, so I believe it's a model called the North American Land Data Assimilation System. And so what it does is it's a model that takes temperature and precipitation and soil type and grids estimates what the soil moisture is going to be for that grid point, which I think on this scale is at 8 kilometer. Russ, are you on?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
We'd have to ask Peter to make sure though.
Yeah, I'll double check with Peter. The best thing I can say is this is still early in the process, so we're still testing out like how good is this compared to what's actually happening on the ground. There are a lot of different soil moisture products that are put out, and historically we were looking at the Vic soil moisture, which was released by University of Washington, and it didn't seem that it was very accurate in its portrayal sometimes, especially in how it responded to precipitation events. So, you know, we're still kind of looking and assessing how accurate these are. So feedback is always greatly appreciated. But this is one that we are closely watching, and that Peter has done a lot of our soil moisture research in the office, and has some confidence in. He's been going to a lot of soil moisture conferences. So hopefully next time he's on, he can speak to why this is a good product. So
another question, Becky. This is Joel.
yeah.
What's the basis of what they're looking at for moisture? Is it a crop or is it native range?
For the soil, they're
Yeah, for the soil moisture, like especially the top meter.
Best I know is that it's just looking at the soil type. I don't know if it's looking at the land type, like if it's, I'm not sure. That would be a good question for Peter.
I mean, I think the model knows what the land surface is there, but only on that grid, you know, so it probably is assigning a single type to the entire grid cell would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's like one giant cornfield or one giant rangeland or something, as opposed to what the actual landscape might look like.
Yeah. And I think Peter will be working on a higher resolution one. But so far this is what he has. And I think he has access to higher resolution. He just hasn't completed that work yet.
Okay, thanks. Helpful.
Yeah. So I wanted to show what the soil moisture looked like as of September 6th, because that was before the snow event, to really show how this model responded to the snow event that we saw. And you can see in both the shallower one, the top 10 centimeter, and the deeper one, the top meter, that there was a lot more drought coverage on the 6th than what we see currently. I'll go back. Here's what it looked like as of the 16th, which is 10 days later. So huge changes in that shallow layer, and definitely still some changes in the deeper layer, with some improvement. And then I asked Peter if he could make some change maps for me over those 10 days. And so anywhere on those bottom maps where you see blue are the changes, the positive changes to plant available water in those grid cells from the 6th of September to the 16th of September. So it was quite the event. Didn't, like I said before, did not eliminate the drought, but definitely was a helpful event. All right, I'm going to move on to the outlook. This is, I pulled this map yesterday. Sorry, I forgot to update it, but this is our 7-day precipitation forecast for Colorado. You can always see all these maps most updated with that link at the bottom. Thanks to Russ for making those. And it's not a very exciting map, unfortunately. Definitely not enough moisture that will help with anything. So I wouldn't expect any improvements to come from a precipitation forecast like this. And more unfortunate news is the 8 to 14 day outlook. So this is looking from the end of September and into early October. The map on the left is the temperature probability So areas in those warm colors are more likely to have warmer than average temperatures. And we see that increasing likelihood increases from east to west. So it is pretty likely that most of the state is going to see warmer than average temperatures for the end of the month and beginning of October. And then on the right is the precipitation probability. And those brown colors are telling us that it's an increased chance of below average precipitation. So we are more likely to see below average precipitation over that 2-week forecast period. This is the seasonal outlook that was released last week by the Climate Prediction Center. This is for the October, November, December time period. Again, the left is the temperature, and that is a very confident forecast that the southwestern United States and Colorado included are likely to see warmer than average temperatures continuing into the fall and even into the winter. And the map on the right, precipitation, is that we're slightly enhanced chances for below average precipitation through the fall, and more equal chances to the north. And this is really a classic La Nina setup map that they've drawn here, with the wetter signal over the northwest and the drier signal to the south. And Colorado's kind of stuck in between, where you don't really know for sure, but it is slightly more likely to have drier than average in the southern part of the state. So let's talk about that La Nina. The map on the left, or the graph on the left, shows the likelihood of La Nina or neutral or El Nino conditions for each of the 3-month periods going through the season. So the blue is the chance that we'll have a La Nina. And then you can see going into the fall and winter that the blue dominates. So the Climate Prediction Center has predicted that there's a 75% chance that these La Nina conditions will continue through the fall and the winter. And we are already seeing La Nina conditions, so they have put us in a La Nina advisory, which sounds very exciting. The graph on the right are the models that estimate what the sea surface temperature is in that area to determine if it's an El Nino or La Nina. And once you get below that -0.5, you're in La Nina conditions. -0.5 to -1 is a weak La Nina. And then from -1 to -1.5 would be a moderate La Nina. So all of those lines are really kind of averaging out to indicate that a weak La Nina will be occurring fall, winter, and then weakening back towards neutral in the spring.
Is that, Becky, is that dark blue line, was that an average, or was that another? It looks like it says consolidation, maybe CPC consolidation.
Yeah. So the CPC consolidation one, I think, is what the CPC initially or officially predicts. And I don't know why they have predicted stronger than all the average of the models. So the thick green line is a statistical average, and that's just using a bunch of statistical models. And then the red is the dynamic models, which include, all the complicated features of our Earth system in it to predict that. And that CPC consolidated one has gone just a little bit stronger of a La Nina event than the average of the statistical and dynamical. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. I would still hedge my bets that it's not going to be a strong La Nina, that it's going to be at best moderate, but probably mostly a weak La Nina event. Oh, shoot, I forgot to put the link for these maps, because these maps are always great to look at from NOAA's Physical Science Laboratory, which it's called a ENSO risk map. And what it does is it assesses the risk of an extreme given El Nino or La Nina conditions. So what I did is I said, tell me what the risks are during a La Nina for the October, November, December time period. So on the left is the risk that you will have a warm extreme or a cold extreme. And for most of Colorado, there's a very slight enhanced risk for warm extremes. That really just means that you're more likely to have really warm days or really warm months than you would in a normal when you look at all the years together. The one on the right is for precipitation and what is the risk of a wet or dry extreme. And you'll notice that Colorado shows up a lot of white. And I think part of that is due to the large basin sizes they've chosen for those climate divisions there. So I tend to look at the surrounding states to see what the direction might be. And when you have Arizona and New Mexico showing increased risk of dry extremes, I would think that that would line up fairly well as you move into southern Colorado, and that possibly the wet extremes you see to the north would also extend into northern Colorado a little bit. So it's going to be a mixed bag. It generally, we never know exactly where that line is going to be, dividing the wetter conditions from the drier conditions, but it usually can happen somewhere in Colorado. It's basically your warning to be prepared for the southern half of the state that we're less likely to get out of this drought going into a La Nina fall, and we're more likely to have continued drought conditions. This article from climate.gov is a great one that shows what the snowfall patterns are for La Ninas. So the one on the left looks at all La Nina winters, and then the one on the right is specifically for weak La Ninas, which is what we're more likely to have. Really the setup in both, you can see that the northern mountains in Colorado tend to have a little bit more snow in the winter in a La Nina. So that is good news for mountains, north of I-70. That's a good sign. Unfortunately, for the southern portions of the state, the eastern plains and parts of the Front Range look like they're more likely to have, or they tend to have less snowfall in a weak La Nina. Few summary points to touch on: that we had a very hot and dry August. We did have momentary relief from an early September snow. Quick return to warm and dry though. Warmer and drier than average conditions are more likely for the rest of the fall. We're in a La Nina, and that's expected to continue through the winter. We're at an increased risk for warm extremes in a La Nina. And the general pattern setup is wetter to the north and drier to the south. And in a weak La Nina, those northern mountains are favored for more snow, but the plains and southern mountains are likely to have less than average. That's all I've got for you today. You can see our other presentations for Water Availability Task Force in our archive. I also want to announce our monthly climate summaries that we have started making. We started one for August and released that in early September, and in early October you can expect the release of our September monthly climate summary. Thank you.
Any questions for Becky? All right, well, thank you very much, Becky.
No problem.
Yes, we will move along to NRCS. I think Brian is here with us today to present.
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Brian.
All right, I'm sharing my screen here. And it looks like I'm gonna have to swap screens. That didn't do it. Forgive me. I'll get this.
We have faith.
I don't know that I do at this point. Sorry, everyone. So I have been having some connections issues in addition to my presenting issues here. Is my screen still showing or no?
No, we just see our meeting info.
All right, let me try this. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, this back over here, and then I will do that. All right, now that should do it. No, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, looks great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Great, thank you both. So I have been having some connection issues. So if I cut out or anything, don't hesitate to send me a message there in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that, or just speak up. The other thing is I decided to go with a altered presentation format here today just because I thought I'd save a little bit of time. Most of the state is experiencing generally the same conditions, much the same as Becky mentioned. So I just figured I'd highlight some of the representative basins, those basins that represent some of the larger areas and other basins in Colorado, and then go over the state. So going into that newer format here, I'm going to do precipitation first across the number of basins. I'm going to start out here with just one graphic of what precipitation has been since the beginning of September here across the state, and then I'm going to dive into some of the numbers that we're seeing in some of the basins that are representative of other basins as well. Okay, so starting off with the Colorado. In the Colorado River Basin in Colorado, August precipitation in the mountains at our snowtell sites was 40% of average, and September has seen a slight improvement, but has only been 64%. And actually just going right back to this graph here, or this map here, excuse me, you can see that the precipitation that we received came mainly from the event at the beginning of the month, the Labor Day event that Becky was speaking about. And you can see that, like some of the graphics that she showed, central and southern Colorado saw some pretty good accumulations. And there were a few other areas that received good precipitation out of that event. However, the rest of the month has not shown very good precipitation, especially in the mountains. And I wanted to point out a lot of these sites that are reporting no information at this point in time. Those are sites that that the Colorado Survey Program has gone to recently and done maintenance on those sites, and we haven't had a chance to offset or correct the data from doing our maintenance there. So getting back into the Colorado, yes, we can see that things have been pretty dry, respectively. So at this point in the year, this is the average stack graph, and then this is this year to this point. You can see that this space in here does not amount to what the average should have been going back to May here. So we have been quite dry this summer, as we are all well aware of. Focusing in on the Colorado River Basin, Yes, quite dry through much of August, even through that nice snowstorm that we had there, an early snowstorm in September. And then here is the long-term trace for the year. You can see we did get that bump, the Labor Day storm, but it really didn't amount to much anywhere near where we, the rate of accumulation in the mountains of Colorado. We should be receiving more precipitation than that. Year to date, precipitation in Colorado is 82% of normal as of yesterday morning. Okay, moving on into the South Platte, which is generally representative of the Arkansas as well. I didn't go into the Arkansas with this presentation. However, precipitation through August has been 33% of average. However, September in the South Platte has been 86% of normal. That storm did benefit us more so than some of the other basins across the state. And you can see here that west of the metro area, not so much in the South Platte, but west of the metro area in the mountains received a good amount of precip for that individual storm. But as Becky pointed out with some of the temperature maps, we've been leveled out by the dry conditions throughout the rest of the month. And then here again, a little bit more of an increase here in the South Platte than we saw in the Colorado. But precipitation as of today for year to date is 89% of normal in the South Platte. Okay, moving southwest into the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins, precipitation through the entire month of August was 20% of normal, but September so far has only been 61% of normal. And you can see that there was a few good locations that had good accumulations, but in general, well below normal precipitation through this part of September. You can see the storm at the end of July made a good bump. Really gave a boost to annual precipitation. However, August was very dry, and I would argue that September has been dominantly dry for the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan basins, and just in the greater San Juan Mountains. Moving west into the Rio Grande, or excuse me, that would be east into the Rio Grande, August precipitation, you can see a solid theme here. August was very dry. 23% of normal. However, the Rio Grande has seen 100% of normal precipitation so far through September. Now, we have to remember that this time of year, I think that only winds up being up to an inch of precip, or somewhere in the 0.6 of an inch of precip is average through this time. Becky can correct me, or Russ can correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody for that matter. But I do know that our total average precipitation is relatively low this time of year, at least to this time of month. So we're near normal, but we don't usually see all that much. Actually, I guess I need to correct myself there. Looks like we're looking more on the about 2 inches would be normal for this time of year. So to see about an inch and change this time of year, still not very much. Shows that we're near normal. And then you can see here in the Rio Grande that we did get some good accumulations out of that snowstorm in the beginning part of September. I would argue that it was equivalent about what we received across the greater sites in the South Platte. However, year to date, the Rio Grande is only 66% of normal here. Okay, statewide precipitation, I already showed this map. But here is our statewide total, 77% of normal year to date across the entire state. This little dip that we're seeing here, we should not see any dips this time of year. However, because of our maintenance, and we have not edited that data yet, that shows a dip. So I would think that statewide, that number should be somewhere in here, just above 25 inches of total precip for the year. And because of the maintenance that we've been doing, I opted not to put a number in for September, just because there was that drop that we saw in that last graphic, and I didn't quite feel comfortable enough putting a statewide number in at this point. However, August precipitation was 27% normal statewide. So here's a summary of precipitation through August as a percent of average, and then September to date for each of the basins. here's the insufficient data or the data edits that we haven't put in yet. But I did want to summarize kind of like the Colorado Climate Center puts together each month where precipitation ranks at this point in the year. And going back to June 1 through today, here's where each of these basins rank in the respective years in the period of record for June 1 through today, and then August 1 through today. And we can see that the Colorado and the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Santa Fe, San Juan basins were record low for August 1 through today. And that does include the storm that we received, but it still shows that we are record low. And then we have a number of basins that are either third lowest or second lowest on record out of either 34 or 40 years for each of those basins. Point being, we are quite dry. If you look at a number of those years that we compare close to right now, in many cases it winds up being 2018 and in some cases 2019. So we're seeing dry years and dry summers and falls over the last few years have been some of the driest, and that has played into some of those antecedent stream and soil moisture conditions that we see as we lead into the winter, which are not good. So I'll go into that here in a little bit. Year-to-date precipitation, or excuse me, this is not year-to-date. It is year-to-date. Water year-to-date precipitation through the 21st here is 77% of normal. As I mentioned earlier, we might want to be a little hesitant on this number because of these sites that have not been edited. Here, I would gander that this number is probably a little bit higher, probably on the order of 80 to, yeah, maybe around 80% of normal. But we'll have to see once we get some of those data edits in. Okay, reservoir storage, again, decided not to go into all of the basins, but just some indicator basins. Gunnison River Basin here, we can see is not as low as we were in 2018 or 2012 or 2020, but is the fourth lowest combined reservoir storage as of right now for the Gunnison River Basin. South Platte is significantly, considerably better than the Gunnison and the Rio Grande and combined San Miguel, Dolores, Santa Fe, San Juan basins. We just dipped below normal in the combined South Platte reservoir storage, but much better than the rest of the state. And then here in the Upper Rio Grande, which is relatively indicative of what we see in the San Miguel, Dolores, Santa Fe, San Juan basins, we are below normal. And comparatively close to the 2012 numbers, 2002 values that we saw. What is not representative of the San Miguel, Dolores, and the San Juan basins here in this Rio Grande graphic is the fact that the Rio Grande percent of normal numbers have rebounded over the last 2 months. They were, I think, close to about 60% of normal, and now I think they're at about 65% of normal. For the combined reservoir storage in the Rio Grande. And then statewide across Colorado, again, we are relatively low for total reservoir storage, but not the lowest that we've seen, nowhere near as bad as 2002, 2012, but we are relatively low. And then here, statewide, just expanding that here, you can see the rebound in the Rio Grande basin. But it is relatively normal to see the drop in reservoir storage this time of year and into late summer. But these are some relatively steep drop-offs that we don't typically see for loss in reservoir storage. But of course, that is explained by the drought conditions that we're seeing. Statewide reservoir storage is at 85% of normal. And then you can see that reservoir storage is worse in the southern half of the state because of the dry conditions, and then slightly better in the northern half of the state where we saw slightly better snowpack peak conditions earlier this year. But then, of course, we can also say that conditions have just been drier in the southern, western, southwestern portion of the state. Not to say that things haven't been dry for the last 3 months in the combined Yampa White, but there are fewer storage options there. There's only 2 reservoirs there. And speaking of that, if anybody's interested in seeing the actual individual storage bar graphs, I do have those in this presentation, but I have them at the end. So if anybody wants to see those, just speak up and I'll be happy to show those. In summary, it has been a particularly dry summer. The table that I showed earlier shows that in some of the record dry conditions we've seen since August 1. And most of the basins are second or third or driest on record for the 34 or 40-year period of records at the end in the individual basins. Reservoir storage is at 85% of normal, but that is down from 90% last month. However, the Rio Grande Basin did rebound a few percentage points over the last few months. Reservoir storage is better in the northern half of the state than the southern half. And again, I would like to continue to caution the fact that even if we are lucky enough to have a good snowpack this year, on the heels of a dry summer and fall, which, as Becky indicated, looks like we're going to have, conditions into next year and runoff conditions will definitely be impacted by these dry conditions that we're having. So that's something that I'm definitely going to be watching very closely. We will be, and it's something for everybody to keep in mind that hopefully we do get a good snowpack, but even if we don't get a good snowpack, the dry conditions that we're seeing right now will make things even drier unless we have a good spring. And even that could abate, could not wind up material.
Oh, I just lost your audio, Brian.
Yeah, we lost. See his slides, we lost his audio. Man.
All right, Brian. Not sure what you might need to do to get back to us here. See that you advanced your slide.
I think I lost connection right as I ended the presentation.
Yes, you're on your last slide there, Brian.
I was on my last slide. Was that the summary slide?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then you guys were able to read it. I won't go into it anymore. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Brian?
Brian, this is Becky. Thanks for sharing those rankings throughout the basins. That's very good information to see.
Yeah, it is preliminary data, but I have enough faith in it to put it up there. So if you guys want to see something like that again, I know you and Peter in the past, I think Russ had been interested in that kind of information going forward. I can put that kind of information out there again going forward.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell from a percent of average what exactly that means. So especially to see that a September to date percent of average of 100%, and it's still at its second lowest for August 1st through today is that's very interesting information there.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's amazing, as you well know, how longer time periods can have different inflections and different kinds of accumulations, dry and wet periods, and how they can all play together.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions for Brian? All right. Thank you, Brian. Let's move on to a couple of slides from Linker. Adam and Ryan will be joining us here once we get their slides up.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy and Ben. Just gotta wait till I have presenter privileges, which it doesn't look like I have now to share my screen. Oh, there we go. Great. So hopefully this will share my screen. Looks like it did. And presenter view. Great. So if everyone can see my screen, which I think you should be able to, I'll introduce myself. My name is Adam Listowski, with water resources scientist with Linker Technologies, based out of Boulder. And I just wanted to take a moment to share a new project that we're starting. It's a research project that's being funded by NOAA's Climate Program Office and the Intermountain West Drought Early Warning System. And the title of the project is Developing Drought Impact Models for the IMW-DEWS, or Intermountain West Drought Early Warning System. The goal of our project is to develop quantitative models that capture relationships between drought indicators and impacts, specifically for non-agricultural socioeconomic sectors of the Intermountain West. So we're going to be looking at public water supply, recreation, energy, and public health. And we hope that models that come out of our research are going to move us towards being of some operational utility for existing management frameworks throughout the Intermountain West, such as specifically the Colorado Water Availability Task Force. And the motivation for our research project is that, when we step back and looked at the literature and sort of active drought management throughout the West, there's a whole lot of drought indicator data that describe the extent and severity of drought conditions. But there's little in the way of models that are able to translate those indicator data into the socioeconomic impacts or sort of outcomes as they're felt socioeconomically for particularly non-agricultural sectors. And this seems to be a limitation on the ability for management frameworks to gauge responses. So that's the goal and motivation. The team we'll be working with is myself, Ryan Spees, Graham Agate, and others at Linker. And then we have a team of economists at Colorado State University, Jesse Burkhart and Chris Gomans, that are going to help with some of the quantitative matter. And with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Ryan Spees, to tell you more about the project timeline and ways that we hope folks here may want to be involved. So Ryan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yep, you already introduced myself. I'm Ryan Spees. I've tangentially been involved with the Water Availability Task Force here for a couple of years. I helped with the 2018 update to Colorado Drought Plan, so I've kind of been hooked on just kind of tuning into what the Climate Center and NRCS provide on these calls. So as far as this project goes, we're on kind of a 2-year time track here. As you can see, August 2022 is when we're expecting to hand off a final product. And there's several phases with this project, and we're hoping to use this group especially to kind of help guide those phases along and be able to provide some feedback and guidance along the way. So our first order of business, as with almost every project out there, we're in the midst of gathering feedback and guidance from stakeholders, such as pretty much everybody on this call. And that's to help us come up with this needs assessment, figuring out where our knowledge gaps exist, where you've kind of lessons learned from your own experiences with drought monitoring. So questions such as if you've come across indicators that specifically help you with your operational needs, or if you're aware of any impacts data that might help us train these models that Adam just outlined. These are all sorts of questions that we're hoping to get some feedback from everybody in this group. So as far as sort of next steps here, we're planning to pull together an email that kind of summarize this and provide that information to everybody on this call. And hopefully we're going to use that as a platform to start gauging some volunteers who would be willing to either provide their feedback through some surveys or some semi-structured interview calls to just kind of walk us through what a day in your life looks like as far as monitoring for drought conditions and tracking the impacts from those. So yeah, Adam's throwing up our contact info here. You'll receive an email from us here in the coming weeks to kind of get more in the loop with things, but we would love to answer any questions, or if you have specific ideas or thoughts on how we can get connected with other groups out there. I know this group is really focused on the water supply aspects, and I know there's other sectors that Adam listed there that we would love to get connected with. So if you have ideas or thoughts on those sorts of things, we'd be happy to hear from you. But yeah, that's all I had for now.
And thanks again, Ben, Tracy, and Megan for carving a little bit of time out for us to share this. Don't want to suck up too much time. If we can answer a quick question or two, we'd be happy to do so, but also glad to just charge ahead with the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks. I know Megan and Ben and I are looking forward to the results of your work, guys, so we appreciate that you're doing it. Anybody have questions or any feedback for Adam and Ryan about their project? Places they should go for some other ideas? So it sounded like you were saying you're putting together an email. Was that an email you're planning to send to the WATF attendees? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's what Ryan meant there. Sort of a large email blast to solicit input to the larger group, from the larger group.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We can move on now to the Impact Task Force reports. I'd like to start with the agricultural sector, if I could. I know we had Joel and Cindy on the line. Wondering if you guys have any reports about impacts you're seeing in the agricultural sector.
Hi, this is Joel.
Hi, Joel.
That nice snow was actually good for getting wheat going. A lot of people were looking at saying, do I plant wheat? Do I dust it in? Actually have good moisture to plant into. So that's going on. Some of the producers are saying that it's been a nice fast harvest because the crop adjuster came through and says don't harvest, complete loss on dry land acres. So we are seeing that in certain spots. They looked at the crop progress report. It's a little baffling because they're actually reporting an improvement in subsoil moisture, and with the amounts that we received anywhere in the state, I don't see how that would be impacting that. I mean, impact subsoil. So we have to have like at least 2 or 3 inches of moisture to start improving those, but they're sowing it, so I don't know. Irrigated harvest will be happening here pretty quick. They are taking corn silage out fast and furious around the areas where we're having the livestock industry. Well, I can't remember when they did it with Pruitt. They put a pudding restriction on Pruitt sometime last month, and they did do on Jumbo a fish salvage, which is the first time in probably 7 or 8 years at least that I know of that I can recall for a fish salvage on Jumbo Reservoir because they're getting so low.
Okay, you're saying water levels were so low at Jumbo that they were doing fish salvage. And what was going on at Pruitt? I heard you say restriction.
Boating, no boats.
Okay, because the water levels so low.
Their water levels are so low. That was back in mid-August, early August. They did that. People were complaining. I said, it's an irrigation reservoir. That's the job it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Other than that, continue to wait and see.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. Cindy, are you still with us? I'm looking at all these names here.
But can I ask Joel about winter wheat planting? Reagan said on a call last week that because of the moisture, people were jumping on winter wheat planting. Is that something that's happening yet?
Yeah, because actually we started to see some come up here beginning of the week. So it's been earliest I've seen with limited travel was about 10 days ago they were planting, and that's up. So the moisture is good. We didn't have to go really deep. I think on ours, where we're doing it at, we were pushing 2 inches down with the seed, getting into good moisture, and it's moving along and popping out of the ground. So this is kind of a typical time period where wheat really starts heading in fast, goes into the ground fast.
Thanks.
That seems to match, Becky, with the soil moisture graphs for the 10 centimeter sorry, not graphs, maps, where the 10 centimeter soil moisture was at least better than it was in the 1 meter map.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall, but yeah, so it seems to match.
Yeah.
All right, Joel, thank you so much. I don't see that we have Cindy Lair on the phone anymore. So that might be it, unless anyone else has anything to contribute about the ag sector. Okay. Let's talk to some municipal water providers. I could maybe just call on you guys, if you don't mind me just calling you out. Swithin, I see you're here from Centennial Water and Sanitation.
Yeah, the old broken record, more of the same. Demands are up. Seeing continued strong demand. Our storage is down to 61%, which is about 80% of where we're normally at this time of year. It was nice to get that break from the cold weather, but things popped back up with the temperatures as far as demand, and really just, you know, as we all see from the projections, future hot and dry. So not real optimistic for the winter or for next year.
I was wondering if some folks had blown out their sprinklers before the snow, and so they wouldn't be watering their lawns as much, but that doesn't sound like it's the case.
I think it was a temporary thing. You know, they shut them down for the cold period, and then as it's gotten warmer, like me, I had to turn them back on because there's just no moisture. The 9/10 or so that we got was sucked up pretty quickly from the dry soils that were there. And we've had 90-degree days since then. So at least it's cooling off in the evening, but it's really good weather for bluegrass.
For it to grow if it gets water, yeah. All right, well, thank you, Swithin. I know we got a couple of folks on from Denver Water, Jason and Nathan. I saw your names earlier here on our list. You guys have a report for Denver Water?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Jason Feinhout. I've got our report. So currently we're at 86% full in our reservoirs. Our historical median is 89% this time of year, so we're down about 3%. Last year we were actually up to 93%, so a significant change from last year. And our demands overall are up as well, even though, of course, tourism use has been down for the duration of the quarantine, stay at home. Residential still is up, and so demand overall is still up. And then no restrictions of any sort from our side. We have been meeting with our water shortage preparedness committee to kind of evaluate conditions, and so we'll just kind of have to see how the winter goes.
You said Water Shortage Preparedness Committee. What could you explain what that is?
Yeah, sure. So what we created a couple of years ago is this internal committee. It's made up of just Denver Water staff. And what we decided to do is take staff from across the organization and put them onto this committee. And we meet regularly, usually 1 or 2 times a year if it's just a normal year, and more often during drier years. And we discuss conditions and talk about any recommendations we want to make to our Board of Water Commissioners as far as restrictions or anything like that.
Because it would be the board that actually needs to adopt a recommendation for changes and
correct. Right. Yep. We the staff can put together any recommendations for the board, but at the end of the day, it has to be the board that makes that decision.
Okay. Thanks. I hadn't heard of that before. All right. How about Brian from Aurora Water?
Hi. Our demands year to date are up about 12% from average. Our storage is at 78% total system-wide storage, and that's actually about average for this time of year for Aurora. Yeah, we've seen, we had a real drop in usage that week of Labor Day when that cold snap, but it has rebounded. It's just like Swithin was talking about, since we've had warm and dry. We have not contemplated restrictions for now, but obviously we'll be looking at conditions over the winter, and we have a drought task force similar to what Denver Water has, and it's made up of conservation, water resources, treatment, different parts of rural water, and we can make a recommendation. For us, it would be the city council that would have to make a decision about any watering restrictions or any movement implementing our drought plan. So anyway, yeah, hot, dry, and we'll just have to watch things over the winter.
Okay. Thank you. Katie with Colorado Springs.
Hi, everyone. So again, I think we're going to be a bit of a broken record, same as everybody else on the call. Right now, our current storage capacity is at 77.6%, and that's probably about 3 to 4% higher than our average for this time of year. So we're doing pretty good there. But our total water consumption for this water year is a little bit higher than 2019 water year, but not quite as high as 2018 yet. So kind of right in the middle there. Our demands did, of course, drop when we had that snow, but everything quickly went back up since we had all those warm temperatures. So people are continuing to water. And I think that's about it on our end.
Okay. How about Erin from Broomfield? Oh, did we lose her? I think she might have left us. Do I have any other water providers on the phone? Okay. Wanted to see Rob Harris from Parks and Wildlife. Do you have anything you'd like to discuss from wildlife front?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Yeah, we've had some movement, and thanks to Joel for bringing up some of our fish salvaging operations. Yeah, between Jumbo and Bar and Two Buttes, we estimate that we lost about $500,000 in just the cash value of the fish. Never mind, sort of the indirect effects to local economies and to recreation more broadly. But so we've also we're in the Northwest region. We're also responding to some of the aftermath of some of these fires, looking at ways to remediate the burn scar areas and address some of the damage and potential damage that could happen up there. One bright spot is in the Southwest. We were able to lift our voluntary fishing restrictions. So that's a nice piece as things cool down. But as folks have said, it's still a pretty tough period. And that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Does anybody else on the call have questions, comments, observations, information they want to share with the group? All right. Hearing nothing.
I have a question for Rob. That fishing restriction that was recently lifted that you mentioned, was that water temperature related decision?
Yes, both water temperature and flows. And they're related, of course, right? The water warms up more easily when flows are low.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, anything else? Megan, Ben, Kevin, any any other information to provide from the state's perspective?
I don't believe I have anything other than I'm just ready for all these fires, Dan. Fortunately, I think they're heading in that direction. And we'll be watching for floods and debris flows in the coming years at all of these major burn scars.
Yeah. Agreed.
I do have an update that the drought plan was activated for the remaining counties of the state. That was approved over the weekend, and so I'm just waiting on the formal letter, which we can send around with the update from this call, and that was just approved by the governor and the drought task force last week. So we now have all counties for the state of Colorado activated by the state drought plan.
Thank you, Megan. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much to everybody for your attendance and good thoughts. We will not be having a WATF meeting in October following our typical schedule. We'll be back here in November. So everybody take care. Thank you so much.